Hazard, a situation that poses a level of threat to life, health, property, or the environment. Once a hazard becomes active, it can create an emergency situation. Waste, unwanted substances or objects which are required to be disposed of by the provisions of national law.
Hazardous waste is the waste that contains components or materials that are highly hazardous to the human body and the environment. Industrialization, human activities is increasing, so the amount of hazardous waste is also increasing. The situation is bad. It is so bad that we need to actually quantitate that situation to see how many people are actually involved, how many people are exposed, what are the quantities that are being produced within. Most of the African countries have no idea how much of the waste is there. They have no idea what is the actual impact. They have no idea how many people are actually impacted. The world has agreed through the conventions that this is a problem that we need to deal with, and that is why institutions like the Africa Institute has been set up to capacitate, to assist the countries and to try to bring some easier ways, collective ways of dealing with this issue.
E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world today. Globally, 40 to 50 million tons of e-waste is generated annually.
There is a lot of e-waste in Africa.
E-waste is becoming bigger in Africa like anywhere else in the world. It's growing probably exponentially faster because Africa is the last continent for digital technology to come in.
Right now, the biggest challenge is creating awareness.
E-waste is any obsolete electronic equipment. This goes from computers to fridges, stoves, microwaves, normal landlines, telecommunications equipment. That actually makes up the bulk. Anything that is electronic is e-waste. The problem is a lot of the toxic parts that will end up being dumped in rivers, excepting what we define as high-yield boards, which would have gold in them, but that's the smaller percentage by weight.
ICT, that is computer, laptops, they have transformed human society, the revolution, innovation. They also contain chemicals that are poisonous, heavy metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, and so on. And because we don't segregate waste, they end up in the same refuse dump as other things. So all these toxic chemicals can leach into the soil and water.
They affect endocrine systems, they affect your central nervous system, and they could lead to your death ultimately.
So the problem is that it has transformed life. Very valuable, but if they are not managed properly, they can also destroy life.
This is a global issue. It is a global issue because it is affecting everybody everywhere.
This is the official dump site of the city of Maseru. And like most dump areas in African cities, it is the destination of everything that is unwanted, including the electronic equipment that we no longer need, because it is not sorted, it is not classified, it is not regulated. That is very unhealthy.
The waste scavengers, the poor people who make a living on the refuse dumps collecting with bare hands, they don't protect themselves, so they are highly vulnerable. Usually they are children.
There's a lot of heavy metals inside your typically lead, mercury, beryllium, some of the more severe heavy metals that cause a lot of health problems.
They remove the plastic, remove the iron, all the cables, they set on fire to get the copper.
They're inhaling all of that, they're not using breathing apparatus, no eye protection, hand protection, etc. And these people are basically dying at a young age, and no one knows why they're dying until they start digging deeper and they find out that these people have got severe heavy metal poisoning.
Electronic waste is very, very hazardous. And I think, one of the things that we need to do is to create that awareness.
The government is working on that area. We are trying to develop a policy and the guidelines on how to handle this kind of the e-waste.
The health hazard of e-waste does not stop with the scavengers who handle it, but extends to everyone who relies on the water supplies that might be affected by the nearby waste disposal sites.
This dump site is situated upstream of the city itself. And the water, it will eventually join the stream that goes into the reservoir. And this water system is directly then taken to the taps to the whole city. So as the concentrations of these hazardous chemicals increase in this water, they will end up with the people out there, and we will start to see some diseases, we will start to see some cancerous substances and so forth, and it is going to cause a problem. At the cost that we are going to pay in human lives, in medical treatment, the cost is going to be so huge to all the countries, to individuals, to communities, to everybody else.
Polluted water can get costly to treat. We really are concerned in the manner in which the coverage of our e-waste management is involved.
Needless to say, that Lesotho has to act now. It has to act yesterday and act fast to make sure that there is no e-waste that is going there, to make sure that the water that comes from the dump site is actually contained and treated.
Only 20% of the African continent can afford to buy new electronic equipment. They buy second-hand stuff. After it's been used, it gets dumped and there's no recycle. That's the actual dumping part of the program.
Products are coming to Africa almost in a tsunami form, but we are not ready to manage them once they are here.
Currently, based on estimates only, we're thinking that there's 36,000 tons of e-waste currently in Windhoek alone.
And if you go to some households in Botswana, one house might be having 5 or 6 cell phones that are not working because they don't know where to take them to. They can't dispose them in the landfill.
You can find more than 5 televisions in every home. Then we are still importing used electronic equipment.
Transworld Cargo is a logistics company, and we are doing business with international companies doing imports and exports, and that's how we started to research on electronic equipment itself. And we found that, especially from Namibia, there's no reverse logistics in place. A lot of electronic equipment is coming into the country, but they are not really returning, especially when they are broken or there's no logistics in place for them to return to the manufacturers.
We are bringing in all this hazardous substance and becoming more vulnerable to them. And that is basically what we have to balance, what to receive and what not to receive.
When people buy this electronic equipment, some process or things must be put in place, especially by the manufacturers, that what they cannot use anymore, or when the stuff is obsolete or broken, it can go back to the manufacturer.
The national policy is very, very important also to incorporate, extended producer responsibilities. We realize that in most instances, the producer of waste don't take the full responsibility on the life cycle of waste.
Zambia has developed a statutory instrument on extended producer responsibility, EPR, which is now in draft form and with the Ministry of Justice. It will now compel all producers of products, particularly the ones that are hazardous to environment, to be responsible for the lifespan of the product other than just manufacturing it. So this is a very good step for the country.
The idea is that the producer of a particular waste stream should have responsibility beyond and even to be able to collect it and help in recycling and help in getting rid of that particular waste.
Although a lot is being done to prevent e-waste from getting to the waste sites through legislation, the challenge of the safe disposal of existing e-waste is still very much a reality for most African countries.
When it comes to the issue of the disposal, that's where the problem arises.
Currently, we don't have systems in place to dispose that. There is a small business people, very, very minimal, very, very small, that are trying, to help in the situation.
There's so many informal sectors that are interested to do something with the electrical and electronics materials, but they don't have the facilities.
Africa, is nowhere close to European standards and requirements in terms of managing e-waste.
The continent lacks a lot of infrastructure and facilities to manage e-waste properly.
What we have behind me here is essentially an electronic repair shop. It is an informal kind of a setting that is actually found in a city market. So what you will see is a pile of equipment. Some of this equipment is no longer repairable. Some of it is just being kept here for scraps, but most of it basically just sits here. There's no formal system of collecting the electronic equipment that can no longer be used. The people who are working here also do not have any idea what to do with them.
In Namibia, we really needed to do a lot of education to the men on the street. That's where it will start. The corporate communication really knows what to do, but the man on the street doesn't.
There's just no awareness revolving around the responsible recycling of electronic waste or e-waste. There are programs in place for your normal recycling of paper, tin and cardboard and glass and plastics and stuff like that. But very few people actually know that you should recycle e-waste. They don't understand the concept.
That's why now we are talking about greening the e-waste trade. The informal sector is handling it. We need to formalize. We need recyclers to use the best methodology, safe for the environment, safe for people while they make their money.
DESCO is an environmentally responsible accredited recycler of e-waste in South Africa. They work closely with the informal sector whilst incentivizing recycling and creating jobs.
What I find amazing is that huge recyclers such as DESCO have clearly expressed their willingness and interest to stimulate the growth of small, medium enterprises. So they're saying, we don't want to grow all over South Africa. We see that it makes no sense for us to, at great expense, try to collect some e-waste in a remote area in the Limpopo. We would rather like to actually find a reliable guy that we can capacitate, that can do some basic dismantling for us so we can pay him top price. And he does the collection for us, and those people benefit.
A company can just do segregation, dismantling, and then remove simple things, plastic, and ship abroad. Fantastic. To me, that can be a start.
One of the companies selling their waste to DESCO is Transworld Logistics.
We are the only company in Namibia who's doing e-waste, and we just finished our infant stage and we are rolling out now. Currently, 70% of the e-waste is recyclable. Only 30% of what we are collecting is going to the landfill, with the absence of an established recycling industry. With an established recycling industry in the country, we can recover up to 95% of the waste we are collecting, and only about 5% will go to the landfill.
At least 23 to 25% of all the volume coming into DESCO currently is coming in through the informal sector that comes basically through our front gates. We have realized the need to embrace the SMEs or the small businesses as well as the informal collector sector. And we actually decided to join the E-Waste Alliance. We have developed a code of conduct that's based on the way we do things, and we've taken some of the European standards and we've walked through it and had a look at the standards that pertain to what we can do in South Africa. We've written up this code of conduct, and they can then join the E-Waste Alliance, the small businessmen, and we're now encouraging them to build up their businesses. We then teach them how to dismantle e-waste properly. We then say we will buy their fractions back and give them a preferential rate, so they're incentivized. They can then train their informal guys that do the actual collection. They can bring their complete units of e-waste to these smaller businesses wherever they might be locally.
Crescent Future Kids is a small business in Zambia that is following the guidelines of E-Waste Alliance and is trying to incentivize people to bring in their e-waste in for recycling.
What Crescent Future Kids does with electronic waste is we put it together and we collect it, and then we separate it so that we have separate components that can easily be either exported or recycled within locally or refurbished. We have a program where an individual that has a bunch of electronic waste maybe lying around their homes or offices, if they bring the equipment to us, in exchange for that, we give them a brand new PC. Okay, full set. People are very excited about it.
The informal collection sector is working so efficient. Now, we can never match this with any formal collection setup. So instead of trying to bully in there with a European model of collection, we should actually take full advantage of the informal collection structures, support those guys, semi-formalize them, make them part of something bigger, tell them, you collect, don't fiddle with the stuff, don't burn it, don't trash it. We pay you top dollars for everything that is actually together, so we don't create this pervert financial incentive for those people to take the stuff apart.
We have to embrace the informal sector. There's a huge market out there waiting to be tapped. We're all aware of the problem. Now we need to look at the opportunity.
Recycling of e-waste is not the only solution. The government of Botswana has implemented a refurbishing program that finds homes for older computers.
Botswana government came with this initiative of refurbishing old computers in order, to increase knowledge on the use of computers, especially in the rural and major villages where access to computers is very, very minimal.
Most of the offices, they do have computers. They have a policy that every after 5 years, this computer come to us to be disposed of. We determine by looking at them and refurbished, and the good working computers, we then send them to our primary schools. We have given 4,600 computers to the primary schools countrywide.
Initiative was meant to say some of the computers, though old, they can still be used to educate, the masses of the students or pupils in the rural villages.
Recyclers like Transworld Logistics and refurbishers like Botswana Refurbishing Program get most of their e-waste from sectors that deal with sensitive information. So, making sure that this information is destroyed is of paramount importance.
From the sensitive ministers like Minister of Defense and the Botswana Defense Force, they remove the hard drives. The majority of them, we do the very low level formats. And then when we dispose as well, we have to make sure that the hard drive, they are physically destroyed by the company which is going to dispose of this electronic waste from us.
We have most of the banks with us now, and their main challenge was what will happen to the data if they dispose through us. And that's the same challenge the government is sitting with now, that the data needs to be taken care of properly. We do give them the solution that we will do mechanical destruction of the hard drives.
I think fundamentally Africans are recyclers, and they have done so since time immemorial. Because once they use a particular something, they will always hand it over to the next one, or they will find an alternative use for it. So fundamentally, this has been happening for generations.
With so much e-waste available, some innovative people have started to repurpose the waste into something completely new. This is called upcycling.
Our main core business is obviously fixing and repairing computers. After being in the field for a while, we got to hear of eCycle. That's how we got into e-waste and deciding to do or build things out of e-waste. We started off with the concept of clocks out of old hard drives because we had so many old hard drives. We moved on to records, lights out of CDs. Yeah, the old CRT monitors which are coming in daily all the time because everybody's onto their flat screens. We're making kitty boxes. We've turned some old TVs into fish tanks. We're taking the components off a motherboard and turning those into keyrings. And anything else that comes into the shop or into our environment now, we try and be creative and decide what we can make out of it before we dump it.
What is exciting about Africa is it's on the upward curve of becoming part of the digital world, which means all the technology that's coming in terms of recycling, all that technology is going to come out. We're at the start of that curve.
The e-waste that is recycled in South Africa currently is around about 8%. It's a burgeoning industry, and just volume-wise, they're talking about an increase of between 400% and 500% in the next, I think, 5 years in South Africa alone. So there's a lot of potential for sustainable job creation.
We're looking at a very bright future. Electronic equipment keeps advancing every day. Believe you me, there's a lot of waste out there.
Now, this is a motherboard. This is what you find inside a computer and most electronic substances. When you look at it, you'll see that there's a lot of shiny materials here. You find silver, you find all these metals, even titanium.
And instead of just dumping the stuff, we can take that and put it through a process and recover those metals. We recover precious metals like gold, silver, palladium and copper, and then you get iron, steel, brass, tin, aluminium, all the other types of metals. And rather than going and mining this stuff out, we can take this stuff and just reuse it all the time.
That is the value of this. It is actually a mine. Now we are talking about urban mines to actually collect all these things and actually get the precious metals from this, not going down into the ground anymore, causing more problems to the environment.
As Africans, we should view e-waste as a business, as a benefit. We've been recycling many other products in the past, and it has worked very well for us. All we just need to do is to have a proper management in place.
E-waste are also valuable resources. We should tend to think that we should not be landfilling them. As far as possible, look at the functionality of these items, whether they can be refurbished or reused. And then if we want to get rid of them, at least the hazardous waste component are not disposed in a manner which will cause harm to the environment.
There is an opportunity in electronic waste, and that is why people are so excited. There are parts and components that are financially highly feasible, that provide livelihoods. We must not ever destroy those livelihoods, but we must also make sure that the non-viable parts, the monitors, the batteries, the stuff no one wants, the plastics, that gets taken care of responsibly.
A lot of job opportunities in e-waste, if it is done in an environmentally sound manner.
Although a lot has been done to support these recycling initiatives, there still seems to be a feeling of frustration when it comes to the support of some governments.
In South Africa, the State Information Technology Association writes policy for the control and recycling of government assets in terms of the ICT equipment. And I had the guy in my boardroom recently, so I said, "What do you do?" He says, "We write policy and legislation for government on ICT equipment." I said, "For how long have you been doing it?" He says, "For 10 years. I said, "How many recycling institutions have you visited in the past?" He says, "No, this is the first one. And this was in this year." So we're sitting with people writing policy and legislation. They don't know what they're talking about. They've never embraced the industry to find out what our challenges are and how we perceive it to be. And that makes it very cumbersome for us to actually go out there and be successful in creating these sustainable jobs for the informal and the small business sector.
From a South African perspective, because under the Waste Act, we do have listed activities that if you're going to undertake them, you have to get a waste license. And one of them is the recycling and reuse of hazardous waste, regardless of the capacity. And I think that's where the concern's coming from. When it's hazardous waste for this particular activities, you have to do a full-blown environmental impact assessment where you study the potential impacts that activity will have on the environment where you propose to undertake that activity. So I think there's always concern on the length that will take, the length of time, as well as the cost involved. I think that's the big concern that comes from these smaller organizations that want to do the recycling.
Government role, in my opinion, is to create a regulatory framework that enables entrepreneurship, that actually stimulates entrepreneurship, that stimulates the growth of small, medium enterprise development. Instead of clubbing us with regulations where it's very difficult to even start out.
It's a combined effort between the producer, the recycler, and even the government.
We have various challenges in as far as waste management is concerned, but pulling together as a team, there's the star that we want to reach, but we can only reach it if we work together as a team, if there's that strong synergy.
We have in South Africa a word called Ubuntu. Ubuntu meaning like community, helping each other out. People also are a bit more open to actually work with each other for the greater good. And that is something that really thrills me in Africa.
We have a lot of skill, we have a lot of ability. The African continent is just full of entrepreneurship and initiative and stuff like that. And if we can embrace that, we can really solve this problem.
Through the Africa Institute, I think we should strengthen this collaboration. And as long as we form a synergy on issues of waste management, then, I see the future becoming even more brighter.
They say a problem shared is a problem solved. So if one country is having a challenge, by sharing it, they're going to help to find a solution. At the same time, to help another country not to go through the same path. It's not a smooth ride, but it's something that can be done with the participation of all the different stakeholders in the 8 countries.